Hello there, your friendly neighborhood 1800 here. Today we're going to learn the London system. This is what it should look like, and we have a slight variation which will depend on your opponent. And generally, this is what you want to achieve. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. If your opponent castles kingside, then you would want to put your queen on c2. And if your opponent wants to castle queenside, then your queen is going to be on b3, so it can pressure the king. Another possibility that could happen is this. This will happen either if your opponent plays his bishop, threatens your bishop, and you have to move it back, so then you recapture with the h-pawn, or your opponent moves his knight on f6 and then on h5 to capture your bishop. You still go back and capture with the h-pawn. That's it. That's everything you need to know about how this system looks. The same applies to the queen as in the previous slide. If your opponent castles kingside, then you need to eye on the h7 square. If your opponent castles on the queen side, then you put your queen on b3 to target the king and the b7 pawn. So here, that's a bit of a lame example how to put your pieces, because for the black, I'm going to just move the knight back and forth and that's it. But here it goes. How do I want to order those moves? That's the move order for you there. You start with d4, your opponent does whatever. Bishop f4, whatever. e3, whatever. Knight f3, whatever. c3, again, you don't care. Just c3, whatever, that's it. Then you move your bishop first, because in some cases your opponent might develop their bishop on f5. And if you play your knight first, then the queen won't defend your bishop. That's it. Simple as that. Then you put your knight there, your queen, and after that you have the possibility to castle queenside or kingside. Normally you would castle kingside, but it might depend. So this is your general setup, and then you castle. That's it. If your opponent has his pawns on this side of the board, then you want to castle on the king side, and if the opponent launched an attack on the king side, then you castle on the queen side. Easy as that. Now I will show you 5 different games that I played featuring the London system with this move order, nothing special, and we're going to start with a standard game. This is what a standard game looks like. d4, d5, bishop f4, we're doing what we want, e3, knight f3, c3. Now I move my bishop back. Why? Because if I get taken on f4, then I will have less than ideal pawn structure. The center will be a bit shattered. I will have control on the e5 square, but I'm giving up the e4 square, and also I'm going to double my pawns on the f file. Oops, a bit of a glitch there, doesn't matter. Now we go back. As we saw in the what might happen part 2. We take on h2, that's it. Now we develop our bishop, our knight, and then I moved the queen prematurely, but it doesn't matter. I'm going to switch it on the side after this. And now we can castle either way, but I would prefer to castle queenside in this situation. So this is an ideal way to play this if your queen was on b3, because my opponent didn't do anything to threaten my system for now. Right now we are going to see what we'll do if the opponent plays bishop g4 and g6. So he's going to go for a fianchetto system on the king side, and he's going to pin our queen to the f3 knight. That's it. Again, we're going to play as we want in a system manner. So d4, d5, all standard, bishop f4, e3, c3. Now he threatens our bishop. What do? We go back, and after he recaptures, we capture with the h-pawn. Why do we do that? Because we're going to open up this file for our rook. Everything is normal, pretty standard. Now it comes the pin. So we really want to jump in the center. This square is free. How do we do that? First, we have to get the queen into safety. We can do it two ways. We can do and go by our business, or we can attack the queen side where he left a bit of a problem, this b7 pawn. So his bishop is no longer there and cannot guard the b7 pawn. What we do? We attack it. Of course we do. Now b6 is a very weakening move. Why is that? Because it leaves gaping holes of light squares in his position. We immediately have to take use of that. So here that's a blunder, as you can see. He could have went back with the bishop or covered with the knight. He didn't have to move the king. And we have to punish this. He moved the king, he's on f7, he lacks the development, this guy's not going to come to the game anytime soon, so we have to go into attacking mode. We put the knight in the center, threaten the bishop, and I on the f7 square, also on the d7 square. He goes back, protects f7, protects d5, protects d7 for now, and we are steady, and gradually we advance our pieces. If something happens to this knight, it could be replaced. If not, we can go on the side, exchange something, I on the f7 pawn, I on the h7 pawn, all sorts of nastiness that we can do. He tries to get rid of our bishop. That's fine, understandable. It's a bad piece for him, he has to get it out. But we gain a tempo once more. We are going to threaten the rook, and he has to move it, because otherwise we're going to be an exchange up. He moves it, and now we want to shatter the king's side. So it's not about eyeing only on the f7 pawn, but if we take this guy and he opens the f file, then he's going to be in a lot of trouble. That's what we do. He might take with the pawn, he might take with the queen, but taking with the queen is definitely better. Now we're going to make an empty move just to see what he does. This is going to be useful for us in any situation. The goal is to push c4 and just to open up the things, because his king is still in the center, his rook isn't helping, it's just in the corner of the board, but not really on the 8th rank as well, so opening the center will be beneficial for us. He goes for knight e4, and now he's diminished his influence on the d5 square, and we can take the pawn. He has to guard the knight, and now we get to a bit of trickery. We take the knight and threaten the queen. So we've gained at least a knight here, because if he takes, he's going to get mated. He can protect, but then he has lost the knight. In this specific situation, my opponent took the bishop, and I mated him on f7. And that's it. Now let's look at a different game. In this case, my opponent played c5 early on, and then overextended on the queen side. We have a response for that as well. That means we're probably going to attack in the center. That's it. Now, we again start with d4, e6, we don't care, d5, we don't care, we play our thing. Now we go back. As I said, he's threatening our bishop. We don't want to take with the f pawn, so we want to take with the h pawn. He plays c5 to gain some space. This is probably the right approach. We put our bishop on d3 again. I don't care about c5. c5 is going to overextend his pawns, and he's not going to have a fun time there, because he's wasting moves and he's not gaining so much by that. Again, he's continuing his idea of pushing pawns, but that doesn't mean he's going to win something. Here there's a tricky move that I played, king f1. That's a bit of a more advanced move, but I think you can handle it. Why is that? Because let's look at the situation. I will need my rook on the queen side. Something might open at any point, and I will need my rook to gauge the open file. Also, if this bishop ever takes, then my other rook will come into the game. So my reasoning is, why should I castle? The center here is closed, he hasn't moved either, so why should I? And also I will have a pleasant attack on both fronts without distracting my rooks with a castling move. That's it, simple as that. Now, very important, I consider that my king is no longer in the center. He's fairly good protected. His king on the other side is. So I want to open the center. As I told you in the beginning, when his king is in the center, you should break the center open. Also, if he doesn't react properly to this, I might fork him, which is also great. He takes, I open the H file. And if you see now, if he castles, he's going to get in a lot of trouble. If I only push this pawn, he has to move the knight, and the H7 pawn is going to get gobbled up with check, and then with a series of checks, then he will get mated pretty quickly and nasty. He overextends and overlooks this pin on the knight, on the rook. I don't take it right away. I go for this. Now my bishop is eyeing on h7, pinning this knight, and overall standing in the middle of the board and exerting pressure on everything. He threatens my queen and says to himself, "Oh, I pinned him good there. That's it. I won a queen." But actually, there's an intermezzo move that I could have done, and that's it. I take on c3, I block this, I take a couple of pawns, and after I change the queens, that's it. I'm a piece up, a pawn up, or whatever, and I'm going to have a simple time winning this game. Another variation that you can encounter is the King's Indian. That's another system. And a lot of people play the King's Indian because it's kind of easy to learn, exactly like the London. But there are things that you can do against the King's Indian as well. And in this game, I will show you what. We start, as per usual, d4. We do our order. We already saw that. It's nothing special. And we castle. Why did we castle? Because now king f1 doesn't make so much sense. He can expand pretty quickly, and he can open the center also with just a couple of moves. Rook e8, e5, and that's it. So just castle. He plays queen e8, which I don't prefer in the King's Indian, and I think that there will be a show why. Now, I start in the center first, because it gives me better chances. I will still control these two squares, which are important, because in the King's Indian, he will always want to push f5. I go back, always take toward the center. Although my rook isn't on h1, you have to always take towards the center, except if you're in a mating situation that requires you otherwise. But this way you're going to have pressure on f4 as well, you're going to support yourself, and this pawn will come further and further in. Simple as that. Just take. Now there's an idea for you. I didn't know how to attack exactly, and I decided to myself, well, I don't want my rook on f1 anymore. I want it on h1. h1 is a better square for me. I'm going to have the open file, and I can attack with my knight, with my knight, with my bishop, with my queen. I have a pawn that I can push and wedge here, everything. He reacts in a standard King's Indian way. He plays f5. I don't care. Don't care. Don't care. I have my plan. That's it. Everything is going great. He comes in. I still don't mind. I have to defend a bit, but it doesn't matter. And now comes the tricky part. He allows me to do this check and come inside. And after this move, I can put the engine on. What's the engine going to say? Ooh, it's not visible, but it says plus 6.1. Although I have 6 pawns, he has 6 pawns, we have 2 pieces, and a couple of rooks, and a pair of queens. That's it. But nevertheless, the engine says plus 6 for me. That's it. Now he makes another blunder. I just take one more pawn, and that's it. 2 pawns, and I'm going to have an easy time winning this game. I have the king side for myself. My pieces are just as well developed as his. I will have a nice outpost here for my knight. I can take the open center, the open file, and involve my king into the game. That's the plan. That's everything. The final game I want to show you is featuring c5 and bishop f5. That might happen to you as well, and let's see it. d4, I'm doing exactly the same as I usually do. c5, that's not a bad move. I'm not saying my opponent is playing something bad, doesn't matter. Bishop d3. Again, I'm going to tell you, this is not the ideal way to play. There are lots of variations in the London system, there's lots to learn, but you can always get away with not knowing if you play this general setup. And normally, the move here that you need is bishop b5. But we're not going to learn that. I'm putting my queen on c2 again, as previously. Now he threatens the bishop, I go back. We've already learned this. That's it. That's all. Nothing more. We take on h. We opened up the h file. And now we take the center. We both haven't castled, but I can break this pawn structure as I please. He allows me, and now I have a centralized queen, better general development, the h file is mine, this pawn is going to be weak. Let's say that the knights are kind of equal, and my queen is in the middle of the board and applying pressure to him. And that's why he wants to trade it. And here there's a valuable lesson. You don't have to always trade. Just, especially if it's a queen trade, you have to think about it for a second. Do I want this trade? Is it beneficial for me? And in this case, as I told you, I have the open f file. I have a better pawn structure. This is going to be a permanent weakness. Why should I change the queens? I think I don't have to. So I declined it. And he makes a large mistake here. Why would you castle into my open file? He does. I castle on the other side. He's starting a bit slow. He's not guarding his f7 pawn or his king side whatsoever. He tries to break in the center. Breaking in the center is a bit too late because my king is no longer there. He had to play b5, a5, b4, a4, etc, 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 just to pawn storm me on the queen side, but he didn't. So I start my own attack. I open up the center, and he comes in. And actually, I don't mind this at all, because if he opens up those diagonals for me, those files for me, I'm going to use them. Here, I sacrificed my rook for the attack. I'm going to show that again. Let's see. He doesn't have so many squares to go. All his pieces are away from the defense, and I decided that I can do this. If I sack the rook and use the dark squares, he can't stop me. And that's it. Just takes, go inside, and there's no stopping this mate. What else can he do? Because otherwise, check on the side, mate again. And he can sack a queen. That's the best move that the engine gives. Sacking a queen. No further argument, Your Honor. I rest my case. This was my lesson on the London system. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're going to use it wisely and explore the ideas that the middle game can give you and the freedom in the beginning that you can experience by just not caring about what your opponent does and then smashing him in the middle game. I hope you enjoyed. Cheers.